missed everything. First smile, first laugh, first everything. I know what it feels to look at your newborn and think, this is it. I'm gonna die and there's nothing I can do about it. I am one of the 50,000 women a year who nearly die due to pregnancy-related complications in the United States. Let me take you back. It's the Friday before Mother's Day, and I'm just sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, looking at Reddit, specifically our baby bumps, because I had a baby bump. And if you don't know about Reddit, it's a link aggregator site, but really it's a big community, a community where I learned about, what things to look out for, and commiserated about my swollen feet, and I always love those great baby announcements. But this day, I saw this headline, Trigger. This is scary, but it's important to know for US mamas. I opened that link and what I found was the first story in the NPR ProPublica series for lost mothers. And it detailed the horrific statistics of motherhood mortality in the United States. But at its heart, it told the story of Lauren Bloomstein. Lauren was a NICU nurse, her husband was a doctor, and Lauren died because people did not listen to her. And she died from postpartum preeclampsia. And let's unpack that. Postpartum means after birth, and preeclampsia means before seizure. Now, I knew what preeclampsia was. My own sister-in-law had it. But what I knew of it was that you had the baby early, and everything's fine. It's cured by delivery. I didn't know that it could happen after you had the baby, and certainly not that you could die from it. I had no idea that just a week later this information would save my life. My son was born on Mother's Day, 2017, and nearly the instant I got home, I realized something was wrong. I felt off. And so I thought, okay, let me take my blood pressure, and it was a little bit high. So I was like, okay, I'm home, I'm stressed, I have a newborn, maybe I'll just eat a little something, take a nap. And so I ate something, handed off my newborn to my mom, and as soon as I went to lay down, it felt like an elephant was on my chest. I would learn later that that was fluid slowly suffocating me in my lungs. And then I had this overwhelming feeling, if I go to sleep, I won't wake up. If I go to sleep, I won't wake up. I knew something was immediately wrong. And so I told my husband, and we wrapped up my newborn and took him in his once used car seat to the nearest emergency room thinking, okay, I know what's happening, I will be fine. But that's not what happened. I went to the emergency room, told them what was going on, and I was met with eye rolls. It took nearly an hour for them to even triage me. After wiping down every surface in that emergency room, trying not to infect my newborn, I get back there, blood pressure, 160/100. They didn't believe it, so they take it again, 165/100. Finally, they start to believe me. But I learned pretty quickly it wasn't them that I needed to convince, it was my doctor. Soon after taking a myriad of tests that showed that I had literally every sign and symptom of preeclampsia, with my blood pressure peaking at 200/115, my doctor came and told me, "You do not have preeclampsia, I want to send you home." I refused. And luckily I did, because 10 hours later, he finally got a hold of the on-call physician, obstetrician at the local main campus, and they finally told him what I've been telling him for 10 hours, that I had preeclampsia. And I was finally treated. When this first happened to me and I first told my story, I was so angry. Angry that that hallmark moment of seeing and being with my newborn was taken away from me and replaced with this disgusting emergency room, a completely dismissive staff, and a magnesium haze that left my body and my brain completely mush. I had survived, but I had lost so much. But what I learned is that I'm not alone. There are 50,000 other women a year who experience something like this. And these women are powerful. Their stories are so powerful. These women have had their uteruses ripped out of them, and with that, their hopes and dreams of more children. They've had to take daily insulin injections because their pancreas is now gone. They've had to take all sorts of medications to get over the anxiety, depression, PTSD that comes along with dealing with this. They have these flashbacks of the OR where they never heard their baby cry, flashbacks of when they finally get home with an empty blanket and an empty womb that once held their baby. And yet they stand. And we share our stories because we know that in sharing our stories, we can save lives. We can save the next mom. And maybe they won't have to deal with what we went through. It didn't take me long to realize that sharing my story could save lives. I first shared my story on Reddit in Baby Bumps, our May bumpers, and within a week, I got a new notification from my new mom, a May bumper, someone who I had shared all these stories with, who used my story to save her own life, again in the face of a dismissive ER staff with postpartum preeclampsia. Suddenly, this community that was just supposed to be there to help us pick out nursery decor was a lifeline for two of its members. And so, only a few months later, a high school friend of mine, Emily Maloney, contacted me because she too used this information to save her own life. She ended up having a seizure in the hospital instead of at home, saving the life of herself and her baby. That is why we share. We share because we know that if we even play just like a small role in helping the next mom, then what happened to us has meaning. This is the mom effect. By sharing our stories, we create a ripple effect across the nation, across the globe, that empowers and educates and brings us together just by sharing our stories. The mom effect becomes like a web where the lives of those who were lost and their loved ones connect with the lives of those who nearly died, and we share our stories and save the next mom. I went back to that emergency room in that hospital system and I demanded they change, and they listened. Now today, a mom gets this post-birth fact sheet so they know the signs and symptoms. They don't have to learn from an NPR article. And when they go to the emergency room, the staff has been retrained, and they see an obstetrician within an hour, like a male clutching his heart would see a cardiologist stat. And so, again, we share our stories because we know it can have an impact, but it is hard. It is hard to share your trauma, and downright depressing sometimes. And so I'm part of a group called the Maternal Near Miss Survivors on Facebook, and I reached out to them one day because I was having a particularly rough time where literally every new death feels like a personal failure. And I was given this poem. It's an abridged version, It's called I Stay Near the Pit. I stay near the pit. My cry was heard and I was lifted from it. There were many others with me stuck in that mire, so I stay near the pit. They lifted me out, pulled me clear, and helped me clean up. It turns out that they too had just been freed from the pit and felt compelled to help me. They pointed the way to the horizon, but something made me pause, so I stay near the pit, drawn forward by love, not to start down the path, but to linger still, for love of those still in the pit. So I stay near the pit. Near-miss moms have seen hell. We have crawled and clutched at anything to try to get us out of it. And when we finally do, we could just put all of that behind us, move on. But no, we want to help that next mom. We want to make sure that she doesn't go through what we went through. And so we stay near. But sometimes it's hard. It's hard to be re-traumatizing yourself, talking about stories where you nearly died. And sometimes you just sit in the parking lot at Target and go, why am I alive? Aren't I supposed to just be grateful? Why am I stealing away to Target to get away from my kid? Am I letting down the women that died? Why am I alive? Near-miss moms, if any of you are out there, I want to tell you that your story is just as valid and traumatizing and hard as anyone else. We live with this. We live with it. And there's no going back to who you were before your uterus was ripped out of you, before all of this trauma happened. We stay and we stand. Because we know that we can save that next mom. We don't want another Lauren Bloomstein or Kira Johnson or Shalon Irving. And to be clear, most of the women that deal with this, who die, do not look like me. Our children need their mothers, and our mothers need their children. And Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die than white women. And this is not due to anything other than racism. This is so much so that a healthy, wealthy Black woman is more likely to die than a poor, obese white woman. It is not about anything other than racism. It is not genetics, comorbidities, whatever you want to call it, whatever some foundations and individuals and even some researchers on this campus believe, it is racism. And this made so much sense and was so clear to me after the film premiere of Toxic. This movie was put on by First Year Cleveland, and it talks about racism, toxic stress, and birth outcomes and how these things are intertwined. I went to this movie, took an Uber ride home, and the Uber driver asked me, "Where were you?" And I explained to him, I was just at Toxic, where it went over the life of a pregnant woman in Cleveland and ended with a pregnant Black woman in Cleveland, and it ended with the premature birth of her baby and the death of that baby. Knowing nothing other than the fact that this was a Black woman, he started asking me these questions. She was a drug addict, right? Well, she didn't get prenatal care. She was poor, no insurance, she didn't go to one of those good hospitals, right? And I kept explaining, no, that's not any of the things. And eventually I just told him, stop. You say all of these things, knowing nothing except for the fact that she was Black. That's racism. And when you do it, it ends in an uncomfortable Uber ride, but when a physician does this, women die. That is racism. And so I left this Uber ride with this immense feeling and need to do more. So I leave you with these final thoughts. If you are a provider, listen to women. Listen to Black women. And don't just listen, act. 60% of the deaths are preventable. If you are pregnant, know the symptoms. And you are going to have to relentlessly self-advocate, because while they are figuring out how to listen to you, you are going to have to be the one to recognize your symptoms. And finally, if you have experienced a near miss, share your story. I know that it is hard, but you might just be that person to reach down and help out that next woman out of the pit that is maternal health care in America. Please, let's create a world where every mother survives and thrives with the mom effect. Thank you.